The plate was still on the table, scraped clean but untouched in every way that mattered. The last fork rested against the porcelain like it had given up too. The coffee pot sat bone dry, just like yesterday, and the day before that. He'd left without a word. Again. The back door had clicked shut an hour ago. The house was so quiet, even the walls felt like they were holding their breath. I sat there, alone, fingers curled around the chipped edge of the table, wondering if I was still part of this house or just another old fixture he didn't notice anymore. 12 years. That's how long I've lived inside his routine. I gave up the job I loved, the city I belonged to, the voice I once used to laugh with. I traded all of that for whispered arguments, silent dinners, and the kind of cold that doesn't come from the weather. I still remember what Mom told me before I walked down that aisle. Don't ever shrink to make others comfortable. I laughed back then, full of some stupid confidence. Thought I was the exception. Thought love was enough. But now? She said she regretted marrying me, I whispered to no one in particular. And for once, I didn't stop her. 2 nights ago, he looked up from his phone, barely glancing my way, said it like he was reading the news. I regret marrying you. No emotion, no hesitation, just fact. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just stood there like my skin wasn't even mine. It wasn't the words that stung. It was how easy they came out of him, like he'd been saving them, practicing maybe, waiting for the moment they'd finally sound right. It didn't kill me, because something inside me had already died. Then came the rest. You ruined my life, he said, scrolling through some video with his thumb. I settled. You were just convenient. Convenient. Like a motel on the side of the road, I didn't flinch, just nodded, walked out, closed the door soft so he wouldn't hear the sound of me slipping away. This morning, I opened the junk drawer, the one everyone has, but no one dares clean out. Receipts, expired coupons, a pair of glasses that belonged to no one. And there it was, a small velvet box, tucked beneath a gas bill from April. I opened it. A watch, silver, heavy, not cheap. Still had the tag, still had the receipt. 2 months ago. He's never worn a watch. Says it feels like a handcuff. Last week, he looked me in the eye and said we couldn't afford new shoes for Emily. Said things were tight. Said maybe next month. I stared at that watch, at the date on the receipt, and something started to shift inside me. Something sharp, something old, something tired of being quiet. That watch wasn't for him, and it sure as hell wasn't for me. So who was it for? The anger came in quiet waves, not loud or messy. Just steady, just real. Was I just a placeholder? I asked the air. A stand-in wife until he found whatever this is? No answer, but I knew. I knew. I went to the sink, splashed cold water on my face, looked in the mirror like I was trying to remember the person underneath. When did I start disappearing? It wasn't a moment. It was a process. 1,000 skipped meals, 1,000 I'm fines. I think it started the day I said I do. He was charming. Or maybe I just needed to believe he was. He had plans, drive, ambition. I had dreams too once, but dreams don't pay bills. So I stayed home, raised the kids, packed the lunches, covered the bruises you couldn't see. My siblings used to call me the easy one. I laughed along, let them joke. Now even my kids don't notice when I miss dinner. I used to think love was about compromise, but maybe it's just a long silence between what we wanted and what we endured. He doesn't just regret marrying me, he never saw me. That's what hurt the most. The kitchen felt colder somehow, not from the air, but from the truth. I sat back down, the velvet box still open on the table. I reached for my laptop. 6 months ago, on a day like this, I set up a scheduled message. I barely remember doing it. Probably during one of those nights I couldn't sleep, mind racing with all the things I couldn't say. It was linked to a shared folder, one he had access to. I opened my inbox. There it was. Subject: If you're reading this, you chose to lie. I didn't click it. Not yet. But I would. Because 2 days from now, what he finds in that folder, it won't just catch him off guard. It'll set the whole damn thing on fire. The first sound I heard that morning wasn't birdsong or the creak of floorboards. It was the soft chime of my laptop. One new notification. The email had been opened. It sat there glowing like it had something to say for the first time in months. If you're reading this, you chose to lie. That was the subject line I gave it, like a message in a bottle thrown into the future. I stared at it for a long time. He'd seen it. He opened the folder. Somewhere in this same house, probably from his phone, he read words I never planned to say aloud. That folder wasn't built for drama. It started as a safe place. Financial records, tax files, scanned receipts, a digital attic for the parts of our life he never touched. But then I began slipping in more. Photos I didn't want to delete, notes I wrote when I couldn't sleep. One file I encrypted, just in case. I called it balance. Not because it was fair, but because it was time someone did the math. He used to say, "The truth always comes out." And for some dumb reason, I believed him. I just never thought I'd be the one holding the match when it did. The house was still, like it knew something had shifted. He'd left earlier for work, same as always. Except now, he was probably sitting in his car, staring at that folder, trying to figure out how long I'd known. Inside the folder, plain as day, were our joint bank statements from the last 4 years. Nothing strange on the surface, but between the lines, overlapping transactions, weekend withdrawals that didn't match his stories, charges from hotels I never stepped foot in. He thought I wasn't paying attention. He mistook silence for ignorance. Then there was balance. That file was a recording. 2 voices, his and a woman's, soft and close. It was old. I'd heard it years ago when I passed by the garage with laundry in my arms. They didn't know I was there. I didn't say a word. I just walked back inside and folded socks like my world hadn't tilted. That night, I made spaghetti. That night, I smiled. But I kept the file. I didn't keep it to destroy him. I kept it so I wouldn't forget who he really was. Every betrayal has a math to it. What they take, what they leave, what they pretend never happened. He knows now. Later that day, I was pouring coffee when my phone buzzed. Voicemail. From him. "Hey, look, I saw the folder. I don't know what you think you found, but it's old stuff. You're digging into things that don't matter anymore. We're past that, okay?" I played it twice. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Calm, measured, like he was still the one holding the reins, like I was the one who had crossed the line. I saved the message to a flash drive and deleted it from my phone. "He thinks silence is surrender," I said to the empty room. He still doesn't understand me. That evening, we sat at the dinner table like we were auditioning for a Happy Family commercial. Emily chattered about a science project. He asked her questions, nodded, passed the mashed potatoes like he hadn't just had a piece of himself torn out. I answered when spoken to, smiled when expected, played my part. In America, I thought, people talk about starting fresh. What they don't say is, some stains never wash out. I watched him across the table. The way he held his fork, the way his face stayed just the right amount of concerned, interested, gentle. It was a performance. He was rehearsing empathy, playing the role of the good husband who made a mistake but cared. This isn't dinner, I thought. It's a test. And he doesn't know I already have the answers. Later that night, I waited until I heard his shower running upstairs before logging into the folder again. Same layout, same files, except there was something new. A file titled, "Since You Want the Truth." I stared at it, heart steady, breath slow. Clicked. It was a photo. Old. From a family reunion. I was laughing at something off camera, hair in a messy ponytail, no makeup. I looked free. But that wasn't the part that stopped me. It was the caption at the bottom, barely visible, written in small gray font. "You never knew what you married." I closed the laptop. Not out of fear, out of focus. For the first time, I realized I might not be the only one with secrets. That dinner invite felt like a test. The text arrived while shadows were growing long across the yard. "Dinner tonight at our place," she wrote. "Let's heal the family rift." The phrasing was soft, but the edge underneath cut deeper than any accusation. His sudden eagerness to send me there, too calculated, too precise, told me exactly what kind of performance I was walking into. I stood before the mirror, adjusting a simple sweater. No jewelry, no flair. I slipped the flash drive into the inner pocket of my purse, checking it again before walking out the door. The drive wasn't a weapon. I didn't plan to use it tonight, but it reminded me I carried something they didn't expect. By the time I pulled into their driveway, dusk threaded into darkness. Warm light glowed from inside. When I entered, the silence was wrong, the kind of quiet made of preparation. She greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We missed you," she said. I sat at the table. He didn't need to say much. The first hint came in his brother's toast. To family, to healing. Then a cousin leaning forward, voice low, friendly. "Savannah, remember that time in college? The rumor that never died?" He acted as if it were casual talk. I let his words land. I didn't show surprise. The comment was meant to cut, remind me how far from them I'd become. My fork balanced between my fingers too tight. I remembered my mother's wisdom. When they can't kill your truth, they'll try to kill your reputation. The conversation darkened. My sister-in-law tilted her head. "I hope you aren't twisting things," she said. "We've heard stories." Her tone was honeyed but barbed. She didn't ask. She asserted. My pulse still controlled. I looked at him. His face didn't change, but his eyes flickered. Because he knew. I excused myself and walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and leaned on the counter. I closed my eyes. I could feel the cold clarity spread through me. Betrayal wasn't anger, it was focus. When I walked back to the dining room, I stood behind my chair. Everyone paused. The laughter had drained away. I cleared my throat. "If someone records what you say in private and uses it to shame you in public," I said, voice quiet but firm, "are they protecting the family or protecting themselves?" Silence swallowed the room. Faces shifted. Her forced smile wavered. His fork dropped. I let them sit with it. Then I added, "This isn't about love anymore. It's about truth, and truth doesn't bend to comfort." My niece, seated at the far end, met my gaze and nodded once, the only ally in that moment. I stood, thanked them for dinner, and walked out. The air outside was cold, sharp. He appeared beside me. "Savannah," he said, voice low, "you didn't have to embarrass us." I looked at him in the dim porch light. The first real crack showed in his expression, something between fear and surprise. "That wasn't embarrassment," I said. "It was control." I stepped close and whispered, "You should have read the whole folder." His eyes flickered, recognition dawning. Then I walked to my car and left. Coming back from that dinner felt like stepping off a stage where I hadn't agreed to be cast. I was drained, yes, but my mind wouldn't quit. I kept replaying the cousin's voice, the fake concern, the glances shared across the table like silent applause for a script I never wrote. I dropped my purse on the couch and went straight into the home office. The air was still. The screen blinked awake. I opened the shared folder again, half out of habit, half out of instinct, and there it was. New log entries, multiple access points, files from over a decade ago, opened, some even renamed. They weren't just poking around, they were digging for something to twist, reshape, rewrite. My pulse picked up. I scrolled faster, each entry feeling like a fingerprint left on my skin. Whoever did this wasn't just nosy, they wanted to control the version of me that survived. I didn't say anything that night, I didn't even breathe too loud. But I knew. I knew the line had been crossed. Morning came. I made coffee. Habit. 2 cups, even though I knew he'd reject it. Still, I handed him the mug like it meant something. "Morning," I said. Calm. Measured. He took one look, then went back to his phone. "Weldon," I tried again. "Can we talk?" "Savannah, not now," he snapped, still scrolling. I stared at the steam rising from the mug. "Just a minute." He didn't even glance up. "There's nothing to fix. Let it go." I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving, his initials etched by hand. I'd made it years ago, back when I believed effort meant something. I slid it across the table to him. "I kept this," I said. "Thought you might still want it." He looked at it, shrugged. You don't need to hold on to things like that. It's not necessary anymore. That broke something I hadn't even realized was still whole. I smiled. Just enough to not cry. Picked the carving back up and slipped it into my palm like it was no heavier than lint, but it burned, all the way to the bone. Later, I was back in the office. Same chair, same silence. This time, I opened the balance folder, and then I saw it. File S8. The metadata didn't match. I clicked in. It was my medical file, a real one. Or it had been. Now, words were missing. Dates rearranged. Conditions softened or scrubbed out entirely. I opened my offline copy from the flash drive I kept hidden in a book's spine. Side by side, the truth and the lie glared at me. It wasn't a misunderstanding. He had altered something sacred, something that should never be touched, not to protect me, but to protect himself. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You changed what I was to cover what you did, I whispered to the room. It was quiet again, but not peaceful. It was the quiet before a choice. That night, I didn't confront him, not directly. I left my laptop open in the living room, screen tilted just right, the folder still up. Let it breathe, let it speak. Then I stepped outside onto the back patio, mug in hand, shawl over my shoulders. The autumn air bit, but it helped me think. The backyard lights flicked on. I didn't move. Inside, I saw a shadow shift. Weldon's. I texted him from where I sat. I see you editing what you didn't build. A few minutes later, the door slid open behind me. It's late, Savannah, he said, voice flat. There's nothing more to talk about. You sure? I didn't look at him. Because I think the edits say otherwise. He stood there too long enough to sweat, even in that chill. You're being paranoid, he finally said. I turned to face him. And you're being sloppy. He opened his mouth, closed it, took a breath but said nothing, then turned around and walked back in, leaving the door half open. I stayed on the patio. Let the silence sit. Let it grow teeth. Hours passed. Before bed, I went back to the office and plugged in my flash drive again, just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. That's when I saw it, something I hadn't noticed before. A subfolder I never made. Archive 12. Tucked inside were backups of everything, versions from before the edits. Each file dated, untouched. Proof. I stared at the screen, mouth dry. He could lie. He could twist. He could scrub and replace and rename. But he couldn't delete the past. Not when I kept my own copy. The next morning was still. No words between us, no glances exchanged. Just the scrape of his chair on the kitchen floor and the sound of the refrigerator door closing. I moved slowly, deliberately, setting my mug down softer than usual, as if the air might shatter. Weldon didn't say a word. He grabbed his travel mug, tapped his phone, and walked out like nothing had ever happened. Our daughter left a little earlier than usual, muttering something about a study group. I nodded, didn't press. I was thankful for the space. Once the house settled into its usual quiet, I sat at the kitchen table and stared out at the backyard. The garden looked peaceful, untouched by the lies it had grown beside. I let my thoughts drift, not in panic, not in rage, just drift. There had been so many times I let things go, times I convinced myself it was better to be quiet than to stir trouble, better to keep the peace than to speak the truth. But that kind of peace doesn't hold. It leaks through the cracks. They say don't rock the boat, I whispered into my coffee, but they never ask who's bailing out the water. That line stuck with me. It wasn't bitterness, it was fact. And facts, when stacked, become foundation. I didn't feel broken that morning. I felt steady, hollow, maybe, but clear. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my bag, and decided to go to the store. I told myself we were low on milk, but truth was, I needed to see people who weren't pretending everything was fine. The local store was only 5 minutes away. Familiar smells hit me the moment I walked in. Detergent, rotisserie chicken, overripe fruit. I made it halfway through the produce section before I heard a voice behind me. Well, look who it is, Savannah. Haven't seen you around lately. Diane, our neighbor 2 doors down. She always had a hand on your arm and a story you didn't ask for. I forced a smile. Hi, Diane. Just grabbing a few things. She looked me up and down, that tight smile on her face. You've been keeping quiet. Life must be treating you well, huh? I gave a non-committal nod, then she tilted her head. And congratulations on the new place in Texas. That second home is beautiful. Weldon showed me a picture at the barbecue last month. Y'all finally did it, huh? My chest tightened. Texas? I kept my voice calm. Yeah, he said you two had been planning it for a while. The house with the big porch. Really nice. I smiled, like someone does when they're too stunned to correct a lie. Thanks. Gotta run. I left the cart, walked out. Keys in hand, jaw clenched. Back home, I didn't take off my shoes. I went straight to the office and opened my backup folders. The mirrored files I'd made months ago, when I first felt something shifting in Weldon's tone. Quiet premonitions have a way of saving you. I dug into the tax files, the bank statements, every monthly download. There it was, a transfer, big, marked as a down payment. The name on the receiving end, a trust, not his and not mine. Then the property documents, registered through a shell entity, beneficiary undisclosed. But it wasn't hard to guess. I didn't need a name. I had enough to see the shape of it. He hadn't just checked out. He'd checked into a whole new life, quietly, carefully, preparing his escape while I watered the plants and smiled through dinner. You build a home, and they build an escape hatch. I sat there, hands on the keyboard, letting the realizations sink in. Not like a punch, but like cold water rising slow around your ankles. Not panic, just inevitability. I stepped outside. The garden was still damp from the morning dew. I picked up the trowel and started digging by the azaleas. I wasn't thinking about the plants. I was thinking about timelines, patterns, silence as a strategy. I pulled the flash drive from my coat pocket, the one with the unedited versions, untouched files, proof. I sealed it in a glass jar, tight. Then I buried it beneath the oldest root, where even he wouldn't think to look. Truth grows best in soil, I whispered. It wasn't about hiding it, it was about anchoring it. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I folded laundry, prepped dinner, barely heard the news on TV. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building a map, one quiet move at a time. Later that evening, I walked into the kitchen and saw them. Weldon's keys, right there on the counter. No note, no thought, just there. I picked them up, walked to the garage, opened the door. His car was neat, always was. Glove compartment clicked open with ease. Inside, a photograph. A woman, smiling wide, young, perfectly staged. Behind her, the porch of a house I'd never seen in person, but now recognized. Texas. I held the photo in my hand a little too long. Then I slipped it back, closed the compartment, locked the car. That smile? It wasn't meant for me, but she's about to learn the cost of pretending you've already won. The hallway was darker than usual. Maybe it was just my eyes, or maybe the house had started keeping secrets of its own. Either way, the stillness was loud. You'd think silence would bring peace, but not tonight. It clung to my skin. I walked past the portraits, years of our family frozen in frames. One of them, the one from that summer at the lake, hung slightly crooked. Weldon had hung that one himself. He'd stood on the old stepladder, balancing a hammer in one hand and a beer in the other, grinning like a boy. It doesn't have to be perfect, he said, just close enough to look like it was meant to be there. That photo had stayed straight for years. But now? Tilted. Not much. Just enough to catch my eye. I stopped, looked at it, and thought, that's us. Still there, technically, just not right. I kept walking toward my study, the floor creaking under each step. Familiar sounds, but suddenly they didn't comfort me. The door to my study was open. And inside, Norelle. She stood there like a school kid caught sneaking into the teacher's lounge. She had papers in her hands and a cloth tucked into her belt. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. "Oh, sorry, Mrs. de Stokes' assistant. I didn't know you were in." I didn't blink, didn't breathe for a second. Mrs. Stokes' assistant. She saw my face. The panic flared up instantly. I mean, you, ma'am. Sorry, that came out wrong. It didn't come out wrong. It came out honest. I didn't say anything, just watched her mouth open and close again, trying to claw the words back in. I was just organizing, she mumbled, backing toward the door. I nodded, slow. Let her go without a word. When the door clicked shut, I sat down and stared at the desk she'd so helpfully straightened. They don't see me, not as I am, just as someone to clean up after. Smile for photos. Fill in the gaps. I left the room and walked to the display room down the hall. You'd think I would have avoided it. Too many memories in one place, but I needed to look. I needed to face what I'd been pretending to ignore. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear the softest sound. And then it came. A crack. Sharp, like ice breaking. I turned toward it and saw the frame on the far wall. The photo of Weldon and me in front of the fireplace. That Christmas we threw the party, no one wanted to leave. The glass had split clean down the middle. No reason, no movement. It just broke. I walked over, touched the crack. My finger paused where the split had separated us in the picture, right between his arm and my smile. It didn't break. We broke. I left it hanging there. I didn't flinch, didn't feel the urge to fix it. I turned and went back to the study, closed the door, sat down, opened the drawer, pulled out the USB, the one I never told anyone about, plugged it in, clicked through the folders until I found it. Archive 12. I hesitated. Just a breath. Then double-clicked. There it was. The recording I wasn't meant to hear. Weldon's voice, smooth as ever, filled the room. She's too comfortable, he said. Thinks she's still got the upper hand. Another man responded, someone I didn't recognize. What if she starts digging? She won't, Weldon said. She doesn't want the truth. She wants to believe what I let her see. Then laughter. Not mine. My jaw tightened. My hand hovered over the mouse, then dropped into my lap. It wasn't the lies that got me. It was how confidently he told them, how easily he dismissed me. He thought I'd never find this, but I did, and now I knew. I closed the file, pulled out the USB, sat still for a moment, listening to the hum of the house. My hands weren't shaking. Not this time. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I was past that. Tonight, I wasn't waiting anymore. I leaned back, let the chair creak under me, and reached for the power button. The screen went black. That's when I heard it. A step, quiet, slow. Behind me, I turned. The hallway light flickered once, then again, and then, stillness. Except for the silhouette in the doorway, someone standing just past the frame. Someone I once trusted. The night had a strange calm to it, the kind that makes you notice the sound of your own breathing. I sat on the living room couch with the lights dimmed low, the soft hum of the refrigerator cutting through the quiet. The family albums lay open on the coffee table, pages of frozen smiles, parties, vacations, all those years we thought we were building something real. I ran my fingers across a photograph of Weldon and me standing in front of the first office. We'd been younger, sharper. There was pride in our eyes back then, his hand on my shoulder like it meant something. Looking at it now, I couldn't tell which one of us started pretending first. The silence in the house wasn't empty. It was thick, almost alive. For years, I filled it with noise, music, small talk, anything to keep my mind from turning on me. But that night, I let the silence sit with me. I realized it had been my only ally all along. It didn't judge, it didn't lie. It taught me patience. Then, a faint creak came from the hallway. One step, then another. I didn't look up. I just said quietly, "You can stop pretending. I've already stopped." Nothing. Only the air shifting again, slow and cautious. Whoever, or whatever, was there stepped back. I exhaled and closed the album. The next morning, a message arrived from Weldon. Subject: Family Company Review. Attendance required. Required. He always had a way of turning his choices into obligations for everyone else. I stared at the screen, reading the line over and over, then hit reply. I'll be there. The rest of the day passed like a slow countdown. I took a shower, dressed in a dark gray suit, simple earrings, and flat shoes. No makeup except for a line of eyeliner, steady, deliberate. I tucked the flash drive and printed copies of Archive 12 into my bag. Each document was a small, quiet truth waiting to be heard. The drive downtown was long and tense. I kept thinking about how that company had once been ours, our shared dream, our late nights, our victories. Now my name didn't even exist on the building's directory. That kind of erasure didn't happen overnight. It happened one silent concession at a time. When I walked through the lobby, the receptionist froze mid-smile. Mrs. Stokes, Savannah, she stammered. I gave her a nod. The meeting's already started? They're waiting for you upstairs. I took the elevator, my reflection following me in the mirrored walls. I didn't look nervous. I looked done. The boardroom door was open when I arrived. Laughter drifted out, Weldon's voice, easy and confident, leading the room like a conductor. Inside, a long table gleamed beneath the ceiling lights. The faces around it, executives, family members, a few people I'd once trusted, turned toward me as I entered. Weldon smiled, the same one he used in interviews. Savannah, he said smoothly, thank you for joining us. We're just getting started. I glanced at the seat at the far end of the table, away from him. It was already labeled with my name. Not beside him, not even close. A token gesture, just enough to look respectful. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and began his speech. Tonight marks 12 years since this company's founding. 12 years of hard work, innovation, and family commitment. His tone was perfect, polished, hollow. We've weathered challenges, celebrated milestones, and now, under Terilyn's creative leadership, we're stepping into a new era. A few polite claps echoed around the room. Terilyn smiled, her eyes catching mine for a second before darting away. And of course, Weldon continued, turning to me, none of this would have been possible without Savannah's early contributions. Her dedication helped shape our foundation. Early contributions. That's what he called 12 years of partnership. My pulse quickened, but I didn't move. I let him have his moment. He went on, recounting our story as if it had always been his, how he risked everything, how he built the brand, how he led the vision. The others nodded along, absorbing his version of history. By the time he finished, the applause was forced. Hollow, I stood. I'd like to say something, I said, my voice calm but cutting through the air like glass. He hesitated. Savannah, maybe we should— No, I interrupted. You've had 12 years. You'll let me have 5 minutes. The room fell silent. I reached into my purse, pulled out the flash drive, and plugged it into the projector port. The company logo appeared, then the folder name, Archive 12. I brought something to share, I said, since we're celebrating transparency. The first email appeared on the screen, Weldon's signature at the bottom. Terilyn copied in the thread. She won't notice. Her silence makes it easier. A murmur spread across the room. I clicked again. Remove her from the trust paperwork. She'll assume it's procedural. Then one more. She still believes this company is hers. She'll believe silence forever. No one moved. The room's temperature seemed to drop. I turned to face them all. You built an empire on deceit. You erased me on paper because you thought I wouldn't fight back. You thought I'd stay quiet. Weldon's face tightened. You're twisting things. I cut him off. No, I'm just playing back your words. Terilyn spoke softly. Savannah, we can explain. You already did, I said. In writing. I let the silence stretch. For once, I wasn't afraid of it. I watched it sink into their skin, into every seat in that room. Truth had its own sound. It didn't need to be loud. I pulled the flash drive out, closed my folder, and looked at the chair Weldon had reserved for me, empty, waiting. I walked over and rested my hand on its back. The seat, I said quietly, was always mine. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, no one spoke. Not Weldon. Not Terilyn. The only sound left in that room was silence, finally saying everything I'd kept inside for years. The first morning after the boardroom confrontation, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Nothing had changed. The same furniture, the same framed pictures, even the faint scent of Weldon's cologne in the hallway. It was eerie how untouched everything seemed, like the walls refused to admit what had happened. I dropped my keys on the counter and saw a folded note sitting beside the coffee machine. His handwriting, precise, sharp. Don't act surprised. You wanted freedom. Here it is. For a moment, I just stared at it. Freedom. He made it sound like punishment. I walked upstairs and opened the door to the master bedroom. The bed was neatly made, untouched for days. His closet was half empty. A few shirts left hanging like ghosts of the man he used to be. I ran my hand along the dresser where his watch used to sit. Nothing, just dust. My daughter hadn't come home either. She'd texted once, a short message saying she was staying at a friend's place for a while. I didn't ask why. I already knew. When families fracture, everyone runs for shelter. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was hollow. I could feel the echo of my own footsteps following me from room to room. I opened his drawers and began pulling the rest of his things out, not out of anger, just finality. Socks, cufflinks, old receipts from business trips he said he'd taken alone. When the last drawer was empty, I sat on the edge of the bed. For years I'd built this home, kept it alive, tended to it like it was sacred. Now it was just a structure filled with proof that I'd been living with a stranger. By noon, I had packed the last box of his belongings and called a moving service. Then I picked up my purse, the one holding the flash drive, and drove to meet someone who might finally help me end this fight on my own terms. The law office sat on a quiet street downtown. When I stepped inside, the receptionist greeted me with polite recognition. "Miss Stokes," she said. "She's expecting you." Her office door opened before I could knock. "Savannah," she said warmly. "It's been a long time." I smiled faintly. "Too long, Claire." Years ago, I'd mentored Claire during her first internship. Now, she was a partner at her own firm. Time has a way of turning the tables when you least expect it. We sat down, and I explained everything. What happened at the boardroom, the files, the trust, the public fallout that hadn't fully landed yet. She listened without interrupting, her brow tightening as she flipped through my printed pages. When she looked up, her tone shifted. "There's something you need to see," she said, opening a digital file on her screen. Weldon created a private trust 2 years ago under a different name, Stokes Development Partners. But here's the catch. The funds came from company profits, and your signature isn't anywhere on record. I leaned back slowly, letting the weight of her words settle. "He hid it?" "He disguised it," she corrected. "Legally, it's theft. Quiet, deliberate theft." I nodded, feeling that familiar mix of anger and relief. "So what are my options?" Claire tapped her pen on the desk. "Litigation is one, public exposure, asset freeze. But there's another approach, mediation. You act cooperative, let him think you're fragile. That's when people like him start confessing in plain sight." A small smile touched my lips. "Let him think I'm just hurt. That's when they talk the most." She looked at me with quiet respect. "You've still got that steel in you." "I never lost it," I said. "I just learned when to show it." I left her office with the paperwork tucked in my bag. The sky had turned gray, the kind of color that matched everything I was feeling. Subdued, steady, ready. On my way home, I took a detour past the old community center. I hadn't been there in years. I parked outside and walked toward the building, its paint peeling, the doors chained loosely, but not locked. I slipped inside through a side entrance. Dust floated in the sunlight, cutting through broken blinds. The air smelled of old wood and time. This place used to be full of laughter, wedding rehearsals, Sunday potlucks. I'd led marriage workshops here, ironic considering how mine ended. I walked through the main hall and saw a small box on a shelf near the stage. Inside was a leather notebook. My handwriting. The cover read, "Trust and Partnership, Lecture Notes." I sat on a folding chair and opened it. The first page stopped me cold. When two people carry one truth, the weight becomes lighter. I read the line out loud, the sound echoing off the empty walls. It hit me differently now. Back then, I believed it. Now, I understood that not everyone deserves to carry the truth with you. Some people only take from it until there's nothing left to share. I closed the notebook gently and smiled to myself. Guess I'll carry it alone from here. That evening, back at the house, I stood in front of Weldon's empty closet. The last thing I did before leaving was place a single sheet of paper inside, my signature, and a single line beneath it. I forgive what you did, not who you became. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't closure either. It was a record. I picked up my favorite tea mug, the one with the chip on the rim, grabbed the garden key, and slipped the flash drive into my coat pocket. The house was dark when I turned off the final light. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. As I drove away, my phone lit up on the passenger seat. An unknown number. One ring, then two. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, it buzzed again. A message waiting. I hesitated, then pressed play. And what he said in that message, it wasn't an apology. It was a warning. I didn't play the message a second time. Once was enough. His voice was cold, calculated, like a man who'd been cornered but still believed he had one last move. If you think this is over, he said, you've only flipped the first card. There was no apology, no shame. Just a warning wrapped in that old smug tone he used when he thought he had the upper hand. I sat in the car with the engine idling, listening to the silence afterward. He didn't sound desperate. He sounded annoyed. I turned the key, cut the engine, and leaned back. My fingers were tight around the steering wheel. For years, I thought silence was a shield. Now I saw it for what it had become, his weapon. But not anymore. The next morning, I emailed Claire, short and sharp. Initiate asset freeze, no negotiation, she replied within 10 minutes. Understood. I spent the afternoon at a diner off the highway, far from town. I needed distance. I ordered black coffee, pulled out the flash drive, and started copying everything to cloud storage. Contracts, email threads, bank transfers, audio memos. I labeled each folder with names that only I would understand. He wanted a war? He already lost it. What he never grasped, what none of them did, was that I wasn't after vengeance. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted my voice back. That evening, a journalist I once coached on ethics reached out. She'd seen the boardroom leak online. Someone had filmed the moment I played Archive 12. It was already circulating. Was that you in the video? She asked. I paused, then replied, it was me, and yes, it's real. She asked for an interview. I declined. Truth doesn't need commentary, I told her. It just needs time to echo. By midweek, the trust account Weldon created was frozen. A notice was sent to his legal team. Claire said his attorney sounded staggered, not angry, just blindsided. Like no one ever thought I'd push back. They all thought I'd stay quiet forever. My daughter finally texted. One sentence. I don't know what to believe. I replied, you don't have to believe me yet. Just watch what I do. I didn't hear back for a while, but she'd read it. That was enough. On Friday, I drove back to the community center, not for sentiment, for closure. I stood inside the same room, now swept clean. A young couple was there, talking to the city clerk about renting it for a small wedding. They didn't recognize me. That felt right. I walked to the stage and touched the podium one last time. Not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself I'd stood tall once and could again. Back at home. Well, what used to be home. I walked through every room before locking the front door for good. I left the notebook in the bookshelf, tucked between two gardening guides. Someone else might find it someday. Or maybe not. I wasn't coming back. I didn't need to. Outside, I stood at the edge of the garden. The rosemary bush had overgrown, wild but fragrant. I clipped a sprig and tucked it in my coat pocket. My mother once told me rosemary was for remembrance, not of pain, but of lessons. I started the car and drove. No destination, no plan, just forward. The phone didn't ring again. He knew better now. And even if it did, I wouldn't answer. What needed to be said had already been lived.